Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to cover the light side Revan or ancient Revan hilt. That's a new release that just came out from Korbanth sabers. Now recently I did the dark side hilt, which comes apart in a ton of little pieces, has built-in buttons that are not removable. The light side hilt is a very different design. So first off, let me talk about the size of this. Just like with the other Korbanth hilt, the size is smaller than other sabers that I'm used to. My understanding again of this one is that once again it is slightly bigger than the Vader's Vault version, but it is smaller than the Saber Forge version, and here I'll show it with a black series real quick. Okay, about as long as a black series, but much, much slimmer. So one of the problems with this hilt in specific is if you're using it, these fangs or claws are kind of difficult to get a grip on with your hand. This one, since it is so narrow, that's not really the issue. They're rises, but they're not hard to grip at all, especially if you grip down here. And they're nice and rounded, unlike a lot of others that I've seen. So they don't have really sharp points except way up here, and you're not gripping the saber up here. So here you're seeing it with a ripper blade. And once again, these things are offered either empty or installed. The empty ones are a couple $100. The installed ones are significantly more. That's one thing that I have, the one kind of beef that I have with the Korbanth sabers is that they're rather difficult to install, and if you try to get them to install them themselves, it's, in terms of what installs usually cost, it's quite a bit. So the empty version, if you're having somebody else install it, or if you just want to use it as a prop with a day blade, this is a ripper blade I've got on here, and that's my intention here. But if you're going to have somebody else install it, this is not really, unless you're really proficient, this is not really a do-it-yourself sort of hilt. All right, so let me talk a little bit about this design. Whereas the dark side came apart in a bunch of really convenient segments so that you can get at all the pieces in there, this one's a little bit less like that. So the Pommel Unscrews, and we have a typical vented pommel here, pretty low profile. Okay, but beyond the pommel, the rest of it's a little bit hard to get to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take the blade out. The retention screws that come with these use these tiny little wrenches that nobody else really uses. But take the retention screw out there. Okay. All right, so if you see down the saber, we've got a relatively straightaway tube. There's a blocked out section in the middle there that stops the blade from going down and stops the internals from going up. So this section is that sort of rise there. That's in the middle to sort of stop both ends from getting into trouble with each other. You can also see a little screw right here. That screw right there is what I'm told is an alignment screw. So if you're putting a chassis into this, that's to help the chassis go in the right direction so that you've got, you can put a groove in the chassis, and that alignment screw will help the chassis move in straight so that all the electronics makes contact. The thing is, unless you were putting in a specific type of chassis, that screw might get in the way. And it's kind of hard to access, oddly enough. There it is. Okay, it's kind of hard to access because the screw is right here, and if you look on the outside, we've got we've got one of the claws or fangs. So it took me a while to figure out how this whole thing works. So how this whole thing works, you can take the pommel off. The buttons themselves unscrew as well. So just like with the dark side, it has these push buttons, so you'd have to have a chassis with tactile switches underneath. But with this one, if you want to put your own buttons that are wired in, you can remove these little buttons that have a little plastic core. So these can glow if you put light under them. But if you don't like these buttons, you can unscrew both of these buttons. But the rest of the saber, in order to get to it, you have to remove the claws. Now there's no screws or anything on the claws, but how they're attached, and this is not my favorite thing about this saber, they're attached with double-sided tape, and there's little knobs to align them to the saber itself, but really they're just stuck on there. So you do run the risk over time of those things falling off, I imagine. I would suggest something a little bit better than tape, but it seems to hold pretty well in the meantime. But attached with double-sided tape and lined up with these, well, here we go, lined up with these holes in the hilt. Once you take off all 3 claws, what you're left with are these Phillips head screws underneath the claws. So let me go ahead and remove those. Alright, so once you remove the Phillips head screws, the bottom part separates from the top part. And this is not threaded, it's just set in there. But there is a hole here and a hole here for aligning the screws, so that it all goes together correctly so that you can get the grooves lined up so that you can put the claws back on. Alright, this also gives you a little bit better access to the inside of the saber. You can see those push buttons there that of course you can remove in favor of some type of monetary or momentary switch. But top portion, bottom portion, claws, pommel, removable buttons. And that's basically the construction of this thing. So this has always been sort of a unique hilt whenever people make it. But this version is no different. It's unique. I'm a little bit skeptical of some of the design choices like the double-sided tape. But by and large, it's a nice, slim, compact, and sleek version of this saber. And I'm a big fan of the base design itself, just not necessarily of one element of the construction. All right, so get this all put back together here. So there you have it, the Revan, Ancient Revan Light Side Saber from Korbanth Sabers. Hopefully this review has been of use. If so, join me back for more in future.